Imagine going to bed every night knowing your 3-year-old sleeping above dangerous, flammable cladding. That's the reality for Chetna Gulati. In September, she discovered her gorgeous new home beside the Thames is a fire risk, clad in the same material as Grenfell Tower. The development in Greenwich in southeast London is only 4 years old. There are 11 blocks there, 1,000 flats in total. They have a 10-year warranty from the National House Building Council, or the NHBC. But the NHBC is arguing with the developers about whether the warranty covers this. I've been to visit the development to meet Chetna Gulati. She told me what happened when they were told the news about the cladding.
The only option was to either evacuate the residents from the property or put fire wardens on a 24/7 waking watch. And as you can imagine, we've gone with the fire wardens patrolling the property 24/7. If we were to evacuate, I don't know where we would go.
Grenfell was in June. We're now in February. The cladding is still up. What's happened in between?
Essentially, we've been passed around like a little hockey puck between Galliards and NHBC. NHBC has washed its hands of us for now. They're not sure whether the cladding that's been put up is fire retardant or not. And so we're being tossed around between Galliards and NHBC. You would expect that somebody who's responsible for A, either developing the building or B, warranting the structural soundness of the building, somebody will step forward and say, let's replace the cladding, we'll argue about costs later. Are they waiting for another Grenfell-like fire with a huge human tragedy? I'm not sure.
What effect is it having on your daily life while you wait to see what's going to be decided?
I think the paramount issue is there's people's safety at risk. We're a young family. My little one is 3. Our ground floor is not entirely covered in cladding, but we sit below 8 stories of cladding. So we go to bed every night concerned, worried about a fire that might break out at some point in time. We sleep with our keys in the lock, on the ground floor, on the small door that opens up into the balcony, and we have an exit plan in mind. And that's not something that anyone should have to think about every single night when they go to bed.
Could we pop outside and perhaps you could show me where the cladding is?
Absolutely. Happy to do that. The cladding here is limited to our front door, and that's my daughter's bedroom.
It looks very smart, your front entrance, doesn't it, with the cladding?
It does look smart, but I won't hold a naked flame to it.
And it must gall you to think that this that's been put here to make it look good could be the very thing that's threatening you.
Absolutely. As you can imagine, being a resident here, I would happily compromise aesthetics for safety.
I'm now with another resident, Katie Whitfield, who lives in another block here at New Capital Quay.
This is our block, yes, Admiral's Tower, facing out onto the river. I actually live on the 11th floor of this development, so it's completely enveloped in cladding, which is very frightening.
Well, let's go inside and you can show me your flat. Got the Thames literally directly below us there, and then out to the right, Canary Wharf Tower.
Yeah, we put everything we had into for savings to put a deposit down on this flat. But as you can also see, all across the balcony, all across the sides of the buildings is the flammable cladding, meaning that every night and every day, it's a very scary thought what could happen. Being up here, as you can see, it's a long way down.
Let's pop back inside and you can tell me a bit more.
There seems to just be a stalemate over the issue of costs. Galliard and NHBC are just arguing over who should take the liability. That is not the main issue. The main issue is getting the cladding off this building immediately so that residents can feel safe in their homes. Just think how the elderly people must feel in this building. And we've seen pictures of what happens to the cladding when a flame is put next to it. It just bursts up in flame. And imagine that going up 13 stories on this building. It doesn't bear thinking about.
What about the cost of the cladding? Because a lot of owners of these buildings are saying the leaseholders have to pay.
I mean, £40,000 per flat. Most people don't earn that in a year. For families with young children, it's just a huge amount of money that most people wouldn't be able to afford. And ultimately, they could end up losing their flat, which is just so unfair. Galliard, as property developers, they're builders. It's their job to remove the cladding from this building. They have a moral duty to do so.
When you buy a home, though, with a 10-year guarantee backed by the NHBC, don't you really think, well, that's everything sorted for the next 10 years?
Yes, you'd like to think that. And we did think that, and there's a lot of correspondence between Galliard and NHBC over who should have the liability. I think they're just hoping that the government will step in at some point and they'll be completely excluded from any liability for these costs. But delaying this is basically saying we're waiting for another fire before we're going to even start taking down the cladding, and that is completely outrageous.
Katie Whitfield, the National House Building Council, told us this is very concerning for residents and they are committed to making an assessment of the claim as swiftly as possible once they have the necessary information, including annual fire risks and maintenance records and evidence that the building doesn't comply with the building regulations in force at the time. They say those should have been provided by the developer, Galliard Homes, who say they are legally responsible for compliance with the regulations as well as the ongoing safety of the buildings. The NHBC say they will commission an independent expert to help progress the claim as swiftly as possible. The developer, Galliard Homes, points out that unlike Grenfell, this development has full fire precautions with fire doors, alarms, smoke extract systems, and there's no gas in the apartments. The block with the most cladding has a full sprinkler system. We'll be hearing from their chief executive later in the programme. People living in hundreds of tower blocks around the UK are waiting for cladding like that on Grenfell Tower to be removed. One of the largest developments with this dangerous cladding is in Greenwich in south-east London. There are 1,000 flats in a swish modern development which is only 4 years old. The homeowners thought their warranty from the National House Building Council, or the NHBC, would cover the replacement work. But nearly 5 months on, the NHBC say they're waiting for more information from the developer, Galliard Homes. One of the residents, Katie Whitfield, says someone needs to take responsibility.
Galliard obviously thinks NHBC should pay, but NHBC want Galliard to provide a fire report. Galliard won't provide that report to NHBC, and all we can see from both NHBC and Galliard is a circling argument that doesn't resolve in anything. I think they're just hoping that the government will step in at some point and they'll be completely excluded from any liability for these costs. But delaying this is basically saying we're waiting for another Grenfell Tower emergency to happen, and that is completely outrageous.
Katie Whitfield, the NHBC say there's no imminent danger to people living there as there are fire wardens patrolling 24 hours a day. They also say it's up to the developer to ensure the safety of the building. But the NHBC will consider a claim under the warranty when they have more information. Don O'Sullivan is the chief executive of the developer Galliard Homes. I asked him what he made of the NHBC's position.
The National House Building Council, the NHBC, have given insurance policies to all of the residents for 10 years that cover the structure. They took a £1 million premium to provide that cover, and now that there's a claim, they're running, and that is wrong.
The NHBC told us that they are actually waiting for information from your management company for the property.
The information that they say they're awaiting is proof that there's a problem with the cladding, which anyone that has got access to a newspaper or access to the internet can easily see. The DCLG advice is any building that has got the cladding similar to New Capital Quay does not comply with the building regulations as it stands today.
The NHBC say the building doesn't automatically fail the regulations just because it has this type of cladding.
The mortgage companies have given those mortgages on the benefit of having a 10-year warranty. And if the NHBC do not deal with this, there is going to be huge pressure coming from the banks and the building societies that have over the years come to take as security the NHBC insurance.
The NHBC have asked that you took out an individual inspection of the building. They asked that at the end of last year. You haven't done that.
The NHBC have not asked for an inspection. What they have asked for is proof that there's a problem with the cladding.
They asked for a
nonsense.
report, an independent report.
Do they think for one possible moment that the result is going to be that the cladding is okay? It is patent nonsense.
The people living there, they don't care who pays for this cladding to be removed. They just want it done. Why aren't you doing it?
The warranty for 10 years is individual to the leaseholders. And if anybody other than the insurance company does anything to that building, it will invalidate the warranty and the insurance for the remainder of the 10-year cover for all of those apartments, for all of those leaseholders.
Have you looked into ways of removing the cladding at all, or are you just relying on the NHBC?
We, like every other developer, are watching all developments to see what can be done and what can work to make buildings like these comply.
Sorry to interrupt, but while you sit and you watch, the people living there in your development are feeling that their lives are at risk.
Well, may I correct you on the point regarding sitting and watching? We are watching to see what develops in terms of designs from the industry-wide and information that comes from the DCLG.
I understand that, but while you're watching, people there are terrified. They feel they're at risk.
Which is why we have spent such an enormous amount of money and time and effort in the pursuit on behalf of the leaseholders for the insurance company to step up to the plate.
One of the sticking points appears to be that the NHBC also carried out the building inspections and signed off all of the flats as conforming to the regulations. Weren't they right that that was the case at the time? Because we didn't know then what we know now.
If we knew then what we knew now, we wouldn't be having this conversation today. This is the first time I have ever seen that the NHBC did not, once somebody reported an issue, register it as a claim and send an investigator out to have a look. They are clearly looking at something that could cost them a considerable amount of money and are putting that ahead of their absolute legal obligations, aside of everything else. You can take the premium, you can provide the insurance, but if there's a big claim, then you won't honour the insurance. That position is completely untenable.
Why don't you, as a company, put your hand in your pocket and pay up as a gesture?
Because that would invalidate everything that the current coverage does absolutely provide to those leaseholders.
How comfortable are you with the NHBC providing both the inspections and the insurance?
Since we have seen how the NHBC have performed on this activity, we have taken a corporate decision not to use the NHBC for any service going forward.
You are the developer, but you are also the freeholder of those buildings. Isn't it your responsibility to make them good?
The apartments are all sold on 999-year leases.
Absolutely, but they're still leasing them.
Yes, and they have the insurance in place, which was part of the original purchase price, to cover them for the 10 years. And if the freeholder does anything to invalidate that insurance, they will be in breach of their mortgages.
Don O'Sullivan from Galliard Homes. The National House Building Council told us in a statement they understand the situation is very concerning for residents and they're committed to making an assessment of this claim as swiftly as possible once they have the necessary information, including annual fire risk assessments and maintenance records and evidence that the building didn't comply with building regulations in force at the time. They say those should have been provided by Galliard Homes, who they say are legally responsible for compliance with the regulations. They say they've now stepped in to commission an independent expert to help progress this claim as swiftly as possible. The NHBC also pointed out they've set up a website for residents to keep them up to date with the claims process.